attention again. Once again, I want to thank everybody for attending the forum this morning. It was a real pleasure to have all of you here, and really grateful for everybody who showed up. And I also keep doing a round of applause for all the speakers this morning. They did a phenomenal job. These events are as good as the people you get to come and share their thoughts and ideas. And we thought it was a very healthy dialogue. It was good to have a discussion. It was wonderful to have all of you here. I also want to recognize the people who prepared this meal for you. Baker Bob's Big Stack Bakery right down the street. Please thank them for the wonderful meal. I was told this was the senator's favorite place in Great Falls, so that's why we went there. It's his recommendation. So he picked the food. So if you have any complaints, you can talk to Senator Burns. It's his idea. As I stated before, this morning was the forum, and the purpose of this lunch is fairly singular. It's just to say thank you. I want to say thank you to basically to one person and to one group. The group is all of you who are here from Montana. I want to thank you for sending this remarkable senator to Washington, D.C. to represent you. I think, as I introduced before, we have Juan McCarley here from APTO, we have David Jones from DINA, who work for public safety organizations. They work with people around the country. And they will certainly tell you, if you want to go up and ask them, that around the country, people who are involved in public safety, one of the names that's always in the forefront of their mind, they're always thinking about, who's always fighting their issues, is Senator Conrad Burns. He truly has become the voice of 911 emergency communications in Washington, D.C. So we wanted to have a lunch. We thought it was fitting to have a lunch here to pay a little tribute to the senator, to thank him for all his great work. And for those of you, and I don't blame you for not wanting to follow the workings of Capitol Hill that often, a lot more interesting things to do, but sometimes things of merit do happen in Washington. And last year, something very significant happened. There was a piece of legislation that close to 3 years ago, Senator Burns drafted, along with his colleagues, Senator Clinton, and on the House side, Congressman Shimkus and Congressman Eshu from Illinois and California. They introduced a piece of legislation that was to do the following. It was the first time in federal statute that would make E9-1-1 a national priority. Believe it or not even up until 1999, 911 wasn't even the nationally recognized emergency call number. It took legislation in 1999 to do that. And this piece of legislation said, we're now going to make getting E911 a national priority. The legislation also set up, for the very first time, a federal grant program to provide funding assistance to PSAPs in order to upgrade their technologies, in order to bring E911 throughout the country. The technology exists where if someone is calling on a cell phone, that they can be traced to a further location, and that the call gets dropped, that they can, the call taker who is taking the call can call the person back. This is a very remarkable technology. That technology exists. The problem is it doesn't exist in about 60% of the country. So we have a real challenge ahead of us to help bring E911 services throughout the country. A state like Montana is among the most that are most challenged. If you are going from Glendive, driving here to Great Falls on Highway 200, you're lucky if you even get a signal. And we all know what the weather can be like up here in the northern tier. It doesn't take a whole lot for a tornado to emerge, or to a blizzard or a storm, or maybe a deer or an antelope runs across the road and drives you off the road. If you happen to be out on a remote highway late at night, and you're driving off the road, you have a signal, you're basically at the mercy of maybe some passerby coming by. Maybe you are within the reach of a cell signal, and you can still dial 911, but if it doesn't have the E911 capability, you're still greatly disadvantaged. So these are very, very important issues to try to advance. And the legislation Senator Burns introduced would set up for the first time a federal grant program. If you analyze the federal budget, and you looked at the Department of Homeland Security has a budget of about $42 billion. None of that is going for 911 services. We spend a lot of money in this country for emergency preparedness. All of it very well deserved. But it's really troubling that we do not have adequate attention on E911 because it's largely at the mercy of the resources of the state and local governments. But we all know in this day and age, having access to 911 across the country is not just an issue for Montana or a local issue, it's a national issue. So because of the senator's legislation, we now have the first ever grant program. He now is working tirelessly to try to get that funded. In addition, that piece of legislation set up for the first time a joint program office that is run by the Department of Transportation and the Department of Commerce. Now, this may sound bureaucratic, it may sound kind of uninteresting, but it actually is quite significant that now we have, for the very first time, a locus in the administration branch of government that is focused on advancing E9-1 around this country. That's going to, in my judgment, that's going to turn out to be one of the most significant aspects of the legislation that was passed last year, is the work of this joint program office that we now have a place in government that is given this mission to focus on all this. So it was indeed a very, very significant piece of legislation. I'd like to now, I'm going to show a short video that tells you a little bit about the E9-1 Institute, caucus, and the work of Senator Burns and his colleagues, and then we're going to have a couple of other speakers get up to speak.
About 500,000 calls for help are made each day to the 911 emergency number system. Maximizing the chances that each call will result in life saved or a tragedy avoided requires dedication and leadership of thousands of people across the country, from citizens to politicians to the first responder.
Hello, I'm Greg Rohde, the Executive Director of the E9-1 Institute, which supports the work of the Congressional E9-1 Caucus to advance E9-1 throughout the country.
The purpose of the 911 system boils down to something very simple. It is about connecting someone in crisis with a call taker who can deliver help as quickly as possible. To the person who places the call, nothing is more important.
Since the first 911 call was made in 1968, thousands of lives have been saved, crimes have been thwarted, and property salvaged because of this easy 3-digit number that gives people a chance to overcome dangerous situations. As technology has changed, so is the complexity of the system, providing greater capabilities and challenges. Knowing where the call for help comes from is one of the most significant challenges facing our 911 system today. More than 1/3 of all the 911 calls made in this country come from a cell phone, yet the technology that's needed in order to allow call centers to know where that call comes from does not exist in 60% of the country.
We have a long ways to go before we can make cell phones as traceable as landline phones for 911 calls.
Addressing these technology challenges requires greater public education and leadership at a local, state, and federal level. It also requires more resources. The General Accounting Office estimates that it's going to cost $8 billion for PSAPs and wireless providers to upgrade to the E9-1-1 system throughout the nation.
The Congressional E9-1-1 Caucus was established to advance enhanced 911 throughout the nation. Its bipartisan co-chairs, Senator Burns, Senator Clinton, Congressman Shimkus, Congressman Eshoo, are leading an effort to dedicate more resources to implement E9-1-1 throughout the nation, as well as to create greater public awareness and educate policymakers and lawmakers throughout the country on the importance of E9-1-1.
In 2004, the co-chairs succeeded in passing legislation creating the first grant program specifically targeted at federal funding for E9-1-1 technology upgrades. Because of their leadership, E9-1-1 services will now be assisted through a new joint program office led by the United States Departments of Commerce and Transportation. The Enhanced 911 Act, which was championed by the co-chairs, makes implementation of E9-1-1 a national priority and will ensure that the federal government will become a cooperative partner, working closely with state and local governments to make our nation's 911 emergency calling system the best possible. Call centers and first responders will now receive the help they need to ensure that our nation's 911 system has the latest technology and best resources available to save lives and protect the public at a time when we need it most. Together, the caucus and the Institute will carry on the mission of improving and perfecting emergency communications for every American.
The co-chairs work closely with the E9-1-1 Institute, which is a not-for-profit organization that supports the work of the Congressional E9-1-1 Caucus.
The Institute helps to mobilize local heroes and leaders at the state and federal level to move E9-1-1 forward.
Improving 911 is going to require leadership. Fortunately, we don't just have a handful of leaders. We've got thousands of leaders, all of which are dedicated to make 911 the best system possible.
The E9-1-1 Institute would especially like to thank Senator Conrad for his tireless dedication to our efforts. We thank him for the leadership he has shown in advancing E9-1-1.
David is the president of the National Emergency Number Association. He leads the organization that represents all these wonderful, dedicated men and women who sit behind a desk at the computer and take these phone calls from people. So David has a few words.
First off, thank you very much for the opportunity to come here and speak in honor of the efforts of this man, Senator Burns, who has helped us. It is truly an honor. Thank you. Truly an honor to be able to do this. I think it's fitting and appropriate, though, that I briefly retell the story that I told in my acceptance speech when I became president of ENA. I enjoy reading about people who accomplish great things, and one of these stories is about what it means to be focused on a goal. A number of years ago, an American woman from San Diego, California, her name was Florence Chadwick, made up her mind to swim the dangerous and very treacherous English Channel. For years, she trained for the swim of a lifetime. She pushed herself to keep going long after her muscles cried out for relief. Finally, the big day came. Offering her encouragement, her mother and friends were aboard the many small boats that would accompany her. Florence was filled with hope as she set out to swim from France to the coast of England, some 20 miles. The day grew late. The channel became windy, choppy, and then a heavy fog settled in. The swimmer could hear her mother and friends urging her on. Come on, Florence, you can do it. Only a few more miles. Finally, exhausted and in unbelievable pain, Florence Chadwick asked to be pulled into one of the boats. As the fog lifted, she and her companions discovered that they were only a few hundred yards from the English shore. Later, she told reporters, "I'm not offering excuses, but I think I could have made it if I had been able to see my goal." Florence Chadwick did try again, and this time she concentrated on developing a mental image of the coast of England. She memorized every feature of that distant landscape, and this scene was clearly fixed in her mind when she again attempted to swim that channel. Once again, the swimmer encountered wind, high seas, and a dense fog, but through it all, she kept that image of the English seacoast in her mind. She did it, swimming the English Channel and setting a world record for that time. She went on to swim the 21 miles from Catalina Island to Long Beach, California, and to swim the Strait of Gibraltar. Florence Chadwick passed away in 1995, but in her day, she was perhaps the greatest swimmer the world had ever known, and she achieved all this because she remained focused on her goals. Thanks to the continued leadership of Senator Conrad Burns, Nina and the 911 community are able to remain focused on